I want to paint a picture for you. You just finished watching an anime, and not just any anime, but one that is truly special. The characters, the story, everything about it rings so true, and you know that this is an experience that will stick with you for a lifetime. It's the kind of anime that once you finish watching it, you just can't stop thinking about it. It burns within your thoughts like a white hot fire, and you just can't help but feel like you need to share this experience with someone you know. So without hesitation, you message a friend about it, eager for them to possibly share in this incredible euphoria you feel after having experienced this amazing story. And when you get that text back from your friend and giddily read over the message, your enthusiasm begins to fade as you read the dreaded words from your friend that populate onto your screen.
Oh, I don't really like anime.
You feel somewhat crushed and maybe even a little judged. You begin to think of ways that you can still maybe convince them to watch it, but you know the writing's on the wall. There's no getting through to them. And it's in that moment you realize you can no longer be friends with this person. Okay, well, maybe not that far, but you are a little bit bummed. I'm sure that there's probably a number of us that have been there before, right? Where one of your friends is adamant about disliking anime and don't really seem like they'll ever really change their mind. Now, as someone who makes anime content on YouTube, I'm probably a little bit biased. Despite this, however, even I have to admit that there are things about anime I'm not as big of a fan of. So I can see how any number of these things could turn someone off enough to where they just don't really feel like giving anime the time of day. Nobody is wrong for disliking anime. That's just their opinion and preference, and they're more than welcome to it. However, I do feel as though that some of the reasons people cite for their dislike of anime are a bit unfair or even downright ignorant, and aren't necessarily sound reasons to dismiss anime as a whole. So today, I wanted to talk about those reasons and why I disagree with them. Which brings us to point number 1. Anime is for little kids. Now, this one in particular, I don't see as much nowadays. However, it is still something that I do still come across, and was incredibly widespread when I was first really getting into anime. The notion that anime is for little kids, and if you're above the age of 18, you shouldn't really be watching it. And as ignorant as a mindset like this is, I do see how someone could think like this, particularly if they live in America like many of my viewers do. Of course, there's always exceptions, but for the most part, animation in America is viewed more as a children's medium. And this was no different when anime was blowing up in the States. The biggest, most mainstream anime from the 90s and early 2000s anime boom were very much targeted, or in some cases altered, for younger audiences. I could see how anyone who grew up during this time, then later grew out of cartoons, could see shows like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, or even Toonami era DBZ, and just assume that every anime is like this. I mean, they came out on children's programming blocks, and two of the most prolific anime distributors in America were called Funimation and 4Kids. Doesn't really give the impression that they're working on things for adults. Something that is only perpetuated when you also take into account the generational gap, most notably baby boomers or even early Gen Xers, people born between the 1940s and the early 1970s. A lot of millennials and Gen Zers that grew up with anime know that there's tons of anime for older audiences. But to the older generation, they grew up watching stuff like Tom and Jerry, Looney Tunes, Scooby-Doo, or even stuff like Astro Boy and Speed Racer. Shows all about wacky antics or lighthearted adventures for children. To a lot of American society, this is just what animation is and ever will be. Not saying this is how animation should be seen, but in a lot of cases it is. And it's this mindset that keeps a lot of people from enjoying animation are taking it seriously as anything other than a children's medium. A lot of animation has to be made with children in mind because that's the only way it'll sell. And if it is for more mature audiences, typically it's going to be a comedic sitcom fueled by abundant adult humor like Family Guy or Rick and Morty, so it's obvious that it's for adults. Of course, in modern times, we are beginning to see a shift towards less comedic adult animated content, but that doesn't change the fact that this is how it's been for a long time, and that a lot of people do still have this mindset. A mindset that historically just hasn't been that widespread in Japan. For the most part, anime has always been seen as a medium that can be enjoyed by everyone there. And not in a, the whole family can sit down and enjoy it kind of way, but more so in that there's just a ton of variety. Not only in what kind of shows there are, but what age groups those shows are aimed at. And I think there's kind of a cultural barrier there for certain people that didn't really grow up with anime or grew out of it. Sometimes it's hard to just look at an anime and immediately know who it's for. In one instance, the characters might be having some goofy, lighthearted fun, and in the next, something incredibly traumatic and dark can happen. This can be kind of jarring for some people. Which brings me to the second reason someone might dislike anime. Anime and its fans are weird. I've heard this one a lot, and I can kind of get where certain people are coming from with it. Anime does have its tropes, and some of them are much less tolerable than others. I get why anyone could have their hangups because of this, but I also think it is a bit of a generalization. Anime is just like any other form of media. It's going to have its tropes, yes, but those tropes are also going to vary from show to show. Just because you watch one creepy anime, that doesn't suddenly mean all of them are creepy, and the same goes for the fans that like anime. I've seen a lot of people just kind of assume that all anime fans are either super immature because they watch stuff that's quote unquote for children, or they're all weirdos because obviously anime is weird, so that makes you weird too. And this can lead to these fans getting treated badly, undeservedly. If you have an anime character as your profile picture, some people might disregard your opinion altogether. And again, this is a generalization. Every fan base is going to have miserable people within it, not just anime. And just like any other fan base, you can't just assume that everyone in that fan base is a bad apple. That's just not how human beings work. And while I'm on the topic of fans, I should also point out that I don't really get the idea that a fan base can ruin a show. I feel like the fan community that forms around something shouldn't really be a factor when assessing the quality of that thing. However, this could basically be a video in and of itself, so I'll just keep it at that and move on to reason number 3. They don't like the anime style. When hearing an opinion I don't really agree with, I always try my best to look at it from a perspective other than mine. But this is one that I've always found kind of confusing. Anime isn't a genre or an art style, it's just a word that's used to categorize animation that comes out of Japan. Anime, just like Western animation, has a huge variety of art styles and character designs. I just don't really get how anyone can take this vast amount of varying works of art and just lump it all under the quote-unquote anime art style. For example, can you really look at something like Ranma 1/2 and say it looks just like Ghost in the Shell? No, of course you can't, because like I said, they're created by different people with different art styles. Yeah, of course there's anime that are going to look at a glance similar to each other, but that's also the same for a lot of different media, not just anime. On top of this, I've also seen people criticize certain animation techniques that anime employs, like having characters remain completely static while only having their mouth move. And while this is true for a lot of anime, I personally would make the argument that anime, just like any other television show or film, have slower moments in their narrative where complicated animation really isn't that necessary in these moments. Yes, there are anime that just have terrible animation throughout, but the opposite also applies. I feel like it's a bit unfair to only focus on the anime that have poor or stilted animation, especially when just this year an anime won the Oscar for Best Animated Film. In my personal opinion, I really have not seen anything that impresses me as much as anime has. I love Western animation. It's been with me my entire life. To this day, Aladdin is still probably one of my all-time favorite films. I'm not saying that Western animation is bad, but what I am saying is that to me, anime is just on a completely different level. And so it kind of makes me sad that there's people that won't even give it the time of day just because it is anime. Which brings me to my final point, and where I believe all of these hangups begin to combine into one. And that is that some people have just never given anime a chance. This can relate to just about anything, not just anime. If our brain is dead set on not liking something, chances are we're going to be stubborn about not enjoying that thing. I know because I myself am guilty of this. Growing up, I never liked Lord of the Rings. Everyone talked about it like it was the greatest thing ever, constantly compared it to my favorite movies, and it was just everywhere. I got sick of it, and because of this, I declared that not only did I hate Lord of the Rings, but that I would never watch it to spite everyone who worshipped it. I was bitter about it, and looking back, this was really stupid of me. I was basically depriving myself of a super cool story just because I was being stubborn and not even giving that thing a chance. And I feel like this is something that people do with anime as well. There's a good chance that there's any number of people who had a bad experience with anime, and now, because of that one experience, would rather write it off completely than ever give it a second chance. And look, people are allowed to have their opinions. If you're watching this and are shaking your head all the way through, disagreeing with everything that I say, then that's fine. You are welcome to your opinion. But I also feel like completely disregarding anime, well, is kind of silly. Anime is a huge well of creativity. And I feel like even if you hate the vast majority of it, somewhere there's an anime for you. Because there's an anime for everyone. And if you do wind up finding that anime, there's a good chance that it could have the potential to give you a completely new perspective.